disguising himself to observe his maid's true nature. He is unprepared for the revelations that follow. Her actions teach him lessons about humanity and humility. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The mahogany doors of the funeral home closed behind Ryan Carter with a heavy thud. At 42, he stood alone in the parking lot, his Italian suit collecting droplets from the light rain. The funeral service for his father, Marcus Carter, had drawn hundreds of people, business associates, society figures, and countless others claiming connection to the Carter fortune. Yet as Ryan watched them disperse to their luxury vehicles, he couldn't name a single person who had shared a genuine moment with his father in years. Inside his Bentley, Ryan didn't start the engine. Instead, he watched through tinted windows as the last mourners departed, their practiced sad expressions already morphing back to neutral. His phone buzzed incessantly, board members, partners, and supposed friends sending automated condolences. He switched it off. The drive back to his penthouse took him past the city's financial district, where the Carter Industries headquarters dominated the skyline. Ryan had spent 20 years building his own fortune alongside his father's empire. Now at the helm of both, he controlled billions. Yet the victory felt hollow. In his private elevator, Ryan caught his reflection in the polished brass walls. Designer suit, perfectly trimmed hair, manicured nails. A man assembled by other people's expectations. The image made him nauseous. He spent that night pacing his penthouse, stopping at each piece of expensive art he'd collected but never truly appreciated. Near dawn, he found himself in his father's old study, now his. A photograph on the desk showed a younger Marcus Carter serving meals at a homeless shelter, before the money, before the empire. Ryan couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that kind of genuine purpose in his father's eyes. The idea formed slowly, then all at once. Ryan grabbed his laptop and began researching homeless shelters in the area. One caught his attention: Hope Haven, just 15 blocks from his building. His most dedicated employee, Lisa Walker, volunteered there regularly. The next morning, Ryan visited a secondhand store in a neighboring city where no one would recognize him. He purchased worn jeans, scuffed boots, and thermal layers. The cashier barely glanced at him. The first time in decades he'd been truly invisible. Back home, Ryan studied himself in the mirror as he transformed. He let his facial hair grow for several days, applied subtle makeup to appear more weathered, and practiced altering his usual precise pronunciation to something less refined. He constructed a backstory for Jake, a former office worker who lost everything in a market crash. The preparations took a week. Ryan arranged for his temporary absence, citing personal leave to process his father's death. He set up automated systems to maintain his business presence and carefully planned how to observe Lisa without revealing himself. When the morning came to leave his old life behind, Ryan packed a worn backpack with bare essentials. He left his watches, rings, and credit cards locked away. In his wallet, he kept only enough cash to appear legitimate if questioned, along with a carefully crafted fake ID for Jake. The walk to Hope Haven took him through parts of the city he'd only seen through car windows. Each step in his new boots felt like crossing a boundary. People's eyes slid past him. No recognition, no deference, no artificial smiles hoping for a business deal. At the shelter's entrance, Ryan hesitated. Through the windows, he could see residents gathering for breakfast. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle. Until now, it had been theoretical, an experiment, a test of Lisa's character. But standing there, he realized this might become something else entirely. A young man shouldered past him into the shelter, then held the door open. "Coming in? Breakfast is getting cold." The simple kindness in the gesture, with no agenda attached, nearly broke Ryan's composure. He stepped inside, the warm air carrying the scent of coffee and oatmeal. Several residents looked up briefly, then returned to their meals. A volunteer pointed him toward the check-in desk. Each step felt simultaneously like an ending and a beginning. Lisa Walker moved through the shelter's dining area with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 40, her face showed the subtle lines of someone who smiled often, despite life's challenges. She carried a large pot of coffee, refilling cups and greeting residents by name. "Morning, Carlos. Did your daughter get that scholarship?" she asked an elderly man who clutched his cup with arthritis-bent fingers. When he nodded, her smile lit up the room. "I told you she would. That girl's brilliant." From his corner table, Ryan watched Lisa work. He'd seen her countless times in the corporate environment, where she managed his charitable foundation with quiet competence. But this was different. Here, she moved with an ease he'd never witnessed at the office. No clipboard, no careful professional distance, just genuine connection. The breakfast rush brought a steady stream of people, some clearly long-term homeless, others looking newly displaced. Lisa handled each person with the same respectful attention, never rushing, never judging. When a young mother struggled to manage her breakfast tray while holding a toddler, Lisa smoothly stepped in to help, producing a few crayons from her pocket to entertain the child. "First time here?" A gravelly voice startled Ryan from his observations. An older man with a weathered face and kind eyes sat down across from him. "Not the chatty type myself, but Lisa insists we welcome newcomers." Ryan caught the irony of the man sharing his father's name, but maintained his cover. "Jake," he replied, keeping his voice rough. "Lost my job a few months back. Been trying to avoid places like this, but—" Marcus nodded, requiring no further explanation. "Pride's a luxury when you're hungry. Lisa helped me get my ID replaced last month. Been trying to find work since." Throughout the morning, Ryan observed similar conversations happening around the room. People shared job leads, offered encouragement, split resources. The community he witnessed challenged everything he'd assumed about homeless shelters. During a quiet moment, Lisa approached his table. Ryan tensed, but her eyes showed no recognition. "Hope the oatmeal's okay," she said. "We do what we can with donations." "It's good," Ryan replied carefully, studying her face. How many times had she brought him coffee in his office? Now, serving him again, but with no idea who he was, would she show her true character? Lisa pulled out a chair and sat down, something she'd never done in his office without invitation. "You look like you've seen better days," she said directly. "We have some job search resources if you're interested. Resume help, too." The genuine concern in her voice made Ryan's chest tight. Was this the same care she showed him at work? Or was that just professional courtesy? He'd always wondered if her dedication came from truly believing in their mission or simply needing the paycheck. As the morning progressed, Ryan joined a small group of residents sorting donated clothing. Their conversation flowed naturally, sharing stories of lost jobs, failed businesses, medical bankruptcies. One man had owned a successful restaurant before a fire destroyed everything. Another had been a teacher before a mental health crisis derailed his career. "The hardest part isn't losing the stuff," the former restaurant owner said, folding a sweater. "It's losing your place in the world. Popey, look right through you." Ryan thought about how he'd done exactly that countless times to people on the street. The realization sat heavily in his stomach as he watched Lisa organizing a schedule for shower access. Treating each person with the same dignity she showed corporate board members. During lunch preparation, Ryan overheard Lisa on the phone, speaking quietly but firmly. "No, we can't accept a partial delivery. These people need proper nutrition. Yes, I understand budgets, but look, I'll cover the difference myself if I have to." The conversation ended with Lisa looking frustrated but determined. Ryan watched her pull out her worn wallet, counting bills with careful fingers. He knew her salary at the foundation was modest. She'd never asked for a raise in 5 years. Now he understood why the food budget reports always somehow balanced despite rising costs. A week into his stay at Hope Haven, Ryan witnessed a scene that shifted his perspective entirely. Sarah, a single mother of 2 who'd recently lost her apartment, approached Lisa with trembling hands and tearful eyes. Her youngest had an ear infection, but the free clinic was overwhelmed with patients. "The pharmacy wants $80 for the antibiotics," Sarah whispered, clearly embarrassed. I tried to negotiate, but without hesitation, Lisa reached into her purse. Ryan watched as she pulled out what he suspected was her entire week's grocery money. "Here," she said firmly, pressing the bills into Sarah's hand. "Don't worry about paying it back. Just focus on getting Tommy better. When Sarah protested, Lisa simply smiled. Someone helped me once when my kids were small. This is how we take care of each other. The exchange haunted Ryan. He'd signed countless checks for charitable donations, always with press releases and tax benefits in mind. But Lisa's quiet sacrifice, done with no audience or recognition, demonstrated a different kind of giving entirely. Later that evening, Ryan found himself sitting next to Marcus, the shelter's resident artist. Despite living on the streets, Marcus had managed to create stunning works using discarded materials. His current canvas was a flattened cardboard box, transformed with found paints into a cityscape that captured both beauty and decay. Used to teach art at the community college, Marcus explained, adding details to a building's reflection. Life had other plans, but art stays with you. Ryan watched the painting take shape, remembering his own abandoned dreams. Before business school, before his father's expectations took over, he'd spent hours sketching and painting. The corporate world had no place for such impractical pursuits. Want to try? Marcus offered him a piece of charcoal and cardboard. Sometimes making something beautiful is the best way to forget what you've lost. Other residents gathered around as Ryan hesitantly began to draw. His first attempts were stiff, corporate precision fighting against artistic freedom. But gradually, under Marcus's gentle guidance, something shifted. The lines became looser, more expressive. You've done this before, Marcus observed quietly. Art's like riding a bicycle, the muscle memory stays. As days passed, Ryan found himself spending more time with the shelter's residents, each with stories that challenged his preconceptions. There was David, a former software engineer who'd lost everything to medical bills after his wife's cancer. Maria, who'd fled domestic violence with nothing but her children and hope. Each person carried dreams and skills that circumstances had buried but not destroyed. The shelter's community operated on an unwritten code of mutual support. When someone found work, they shared job leads. When supplies ran low, people split resources without complaint. Ryan watched his residents with literally nothing to give still found ways to help others. One afternoon, while helping Marcus organize an impromptu art class for the shelter's children, Ryan caught sight of Lisa watching them. The pride in her expression as she observed the kids creating sparked something in him, a reminder of what genuine purpose felt like. Jake's got a good eye, Marcus told Lisa, gesturing to Ryan's latest drawing. Been helping me teach the kids perspective. Sometimes the best view comes from unexpected angles. Lisa studied Ryan's work with interest. You're full of surprises, Jake. We could use these skills for the shelter's fundraising materials. The irony of Lisa not recognizing her employer's artistic style made Ryan both amused and uncomfortable. He'd never shared this side of himself at work, maintaining the polished corporate image expected of him. Here, paradoxically, he felt more genuine in his disguise than he ever had in his tailored suits. The weekly meal distribution brought Ryan face-to-face with the true scope of need in a city. He found himself working alongside Lisa, handing out food packages to a line that stretched around the block. Each face told a different story. Elderly couples stretching fixed incomes, young professionals recently laid off, families caught between paychecks. Remember to save some of the fruit cups for the kids coming later. Lisa instructed volunteers, her organizational skills evident even in this setting. And Mrs. Chun needs the low-sodium options. Her blood pressure's been high. Ryan marveled at her attention to detail, how she remembered each person's specific needs. At work, he'd appreciated her efficiency. Now he understood it was backed by genuine care. During a brief break, they sat together on the shelter's back steps, sharing coffee from paper cups. What brought you here, Jake? Lisa asked, her voice gentle but direct. Ryan had rehearsed his cover story thoroughly, but sitting beside her, the prepared lies felt wrong. He opted for a version of the truth. Lost my way, he said quietly. Had everything society says you should want, but it felt empty. Needed to understand what really matters. Lisa nodded, surprising him with her response. I get that. Before I started working at the foundation. She paused and Ryan held his breath. I was just going through the motions. Good job, decent pay, but something was missing. Then my kids and I hit rough times. The community here saved us in more ways than one. This was news to Ryan. He'd never known Lisa had personally experienced hardship. Her personnel file listed previous employment, but nothing about this part of her story. "My dream is to expand the shelter's programs," she continued, unaware she was sharing these hopes with her actual employer. Not just meals and beds, but real opportunities. Job training, counseling, childcare. People here have so much potential, they just need a chance. Ryan thought about the millions sitting in his foundation's accounts, carefully managed for maximum tax benefits, but perhaps missing the real opportunities for impact. The conversation shifted when a young mother approached Lisa, clearly distressed. Her son had an important school interview the next day, but nothing appropriate to wear. Without hesitation, Lisa offered to stay late and help search the donation bins. "Jake, could you help us look? You got a good eye for these things?" Lisa asked. Ryan nodded, remembering how she'd always complimented his professional appearance at work. They spent hours sorting through donations, finally assembling a decent outfit. The boy's face lit up when he tried it on, and his mother burst into tears of relief. "Now I just have to figure out transportation," she worried. "I can give him a ride," Lisa offered immediately. "It's on my way to work." Ryan knew it wasn't. The school was in the opposite direction of the foundation offices. He watched Lisa note the appointment in her phone, adding yet another commitment to her already full schedule. Later that night, unable to sleep on his shelter cot, Ryan overheard Lisa on the phone. "Why? TH her own children." "Yes, sweetie, mommy's working late again." "No, don't wait up." "Yes, I'll be there for your presentation tomorrow, I promise." The exhaustion in her voice was clear, but so was her determination. Ryan thought about all the times he'd kept her working late at the office, never considering she had her own family waiting at home. Yet here she was, voluntarily extending her day to help others. As spring rains intensified, Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to art sessions with Marcus. During these moments, he rediscovered a part of himself long buried under corporate responsibilities. His drawings evolved from tentative sketches to bold statements, often capturing the quiet dignity of shelter life. "You're finding your voice," Marcus observed one evening, as Ryan completed a portrait of an elderly resident sleeping. "Your early stuff was technically good, but now there's heart in it." The shelter's art corner had become a sanctuary for many residents. Children would gather to paint, their worries temporarily forgotten. Adults would join during free moments, creating despite their circumstances. Ryan watched Lisa occasionally pause in her duties to admire their work, her expression wistful. Then came the storm that changed everything. It started as a typical spring downpour, but quickly intensified. By midnight, the shelter's aging roof began to leak in multiple places. Ryan woke to the sound of water dripping into hastily placed buckets and Lisa's voice directing residents to safer areas. "Move the children to the dining area," she instructed, her calm masking obvious concern. "Mrs. Chun, please take your medication with you. Marcus, can you help secure the art supplies?" The situation deteriorated rapidly. Water began seeping through walls, threatening both the building's structure and the residents' few possessions. Lisa coordinated with other shelters, but all were already overcrowded. "The foundation I work for might be able to help," she said during an emergency staff meeting, unaware that the foundation's owner was sitting among the residents. But the approval process takes weeks. Ryan watched as residents, despite their own precarious situations, began organizing themselves. Someone started a chain to move supplies to higher ground. Others comforted frightened children. The young mother, Sarah, whose antibiotics Lisa had paid for, offered to share her umbrella with elderly residents who needed to reach the bathroom. In the midst of chaos, Marcus approached Lisa with an idea. "We could sell some of our artwork. Jake's got some good pieces too. Maybe do a quick fundraiser." Lisa's eyes lit up. "The community center might let us use their space. We could combine it with a meal service, get more people involved." Ryan observed as the crisis transformed into an opportunity for community action. Residents pooled their minimal resources, coins found in pockets, skills they could offer. One former construction worker offered to assess the damage. A retired accountant began calculating minimal repair costs. The scene struck Ryan deeply. These people, who had so little, gave without hesitation. It was a stark contrast to his corporate world, where charity often came with conditions and press releases. Lisa worked tirelessly, making calls, coordinating volunteers, all while mopping up water and ensuring everyone had dry bedding. At dawn, Ryan found her sitting alone in the kitchen, finally showing signs of exhaustion. "We can't lose this place," she said quietly when he joined her. "For so many, it's their only safe space." Ryan thought about the millions in his personal accounts, the expensive art collecting dust in his penthouse. One signature could solve everything, but that would mean revealing his identity and potentially destroying the trust he'd built. "Sometimes help comes from unexpected places," he offered, choosing his words carefully. "This community's stronger than it looks." As the sun rose, residents gathered to assess the damage. The roof would need significant repairs. The electrical system had to be checked. Mold prevention would be crucial. The list seemed overwhelming, but instead of defeat, Ryan witnessed something remarkable: hope, determination, and immediate action. In the aftermath of the storm, Ryan found himself naturally falling into a leadership role, drawing on his business experience while carefully maintaining his cover as Jake. He created detailed repair schedules, organized volunteer teams, and developed efficient systems for managing donations, all while appearing to be just another helpful resident. "Jake, where did you learn to coordinate like this?" Lisa asked one afternoon, reviewing his meticulously organized repair plans. "Previous life," he answered truthfully, then added with careful vagueness. "Used to manage projects before everything fell apart." The reconstruction efforts revealed a side of the community that touched Ryan deeply. Local businesses, many struggling themselves, donated materials. Residents from other shelters came to help. Even some of the shelter's former residents, now back on their feet, returned to offer assistance. Lisa and Ryan found themselves working closely together, their complementary skills creating an effective partnership. She knew the community's needs intimately, while his organizational abilities helped transform good intentions into concrete results. During a late-night planning session, they sat surrounded by blueprints and supply lists. The shelter's usual evening noise had faded, leaving them in comfortable silence, broken only by the scratch of pencils and rustling papers. "You know what's strange, Jake?" Lisa said suddenly, looking up from her notes. "Working with you feels familiar somehow, like we've done this before." Ryan's heart skipped a beat, but Lisa continued before he could respond. "Maybe it's just that you approach things the way my boss does, very systematic, very thorough. Though he'd probably be wearing a suit instead of these work clothes." The irony of her words made Ryan both amused and uncomfortable. He learned more about Lisa's perception of him, her actual boss, through these casual comments than years of professional interaction. "Tell me about your boss," he prompted, curious despite the risk. Lisa seemed to choose her words carefully. "He's complicated, brilliant with business, generous with donations, but sometimes I wonder if he really understands what we do here. The human side of it, you know? He's never actually visited the shelter, despite funding it." Her words stung, but Ryan knew they were fair. He'd always viewed the shelter as a line item in his foundation's budget, not as the living, breathing community he'd come to know. "Maybe he's afraid," Ryan suggested quietly. "Sometimes it's easier to write checks than face reality." "Maybe," Lisa agreed, "but you can't really help people if you're afraid to know them. That's what makes this place special. We're all in it together, no barriers." As they worked through the night, Ryan found himself sharing more genuine parts of himself than he ever had as Ryan Carter. He talked about his love of art, his complicated relationship with his father, his growing dissatisfaction with material success. Lisa listened without judgment, offering insights that made him see his own life differently. "You know what I've learned here?" she said as they finished the night's planning. "Sometimes losing everything is just making room for something better. Look at you. You've lost your old life, but you've found a new purpose here." Ryan sat with that thought long after Lisa left, staring at their shared work. He'd come to test her loyalty, but instead, he was the one being tested and transformed. The community event planning revealed a new dimension of complexity in Ryan's deception. As Jake, he'd been tasked with coordinating the fundraising art show, working alongside Marcus to showcase the shelter residents' talents. Each day brought him closer to both the community and the inevitable moment of truth. "We need someone to speak at the opening," Lisa announced during a planning meeting. "Jake, would you consider it? Your story could really move people." The request sent a wave of anxiety through Ryan. Public speaking was something he'd mastered as Ryan Carter, but the thought of addressing a crowd as Jake, knowing Lisa would be watching, made his palms sweat. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," he hedged, but Lisa persisted. "You have a way with words, and you understand both worlds," she argued. "You could help people see what this place really means." The irony of her words wasn't lost on him. He did understand both worlds, more literally than she knew. But each day, the line between his two identities grew more blurred. The genuine connections he'd formed as Jake felt more real than 2 decades of business relationships. During event preparations, Ryan worked meticulously to avoid photography or publicity that might expose him. He redirected Lisa's attempts to put him in the spotlight, suggesting other residents share their stories instead. Yet each deflection felt increasingly like a betrayal of the community's trust. The event itself transformed the community center into an art gallery. Marcus's paintings drew significant attention, while other residents displayed crafts, photography, and written works. Ryan's own pieces, created during his shelter stay, captured moments of dignity in daily shelter life. An elderly man sharing his blanket with a newcomer, children studying together under flickering lights, Lisa's quiet acts of kindness. "These are remarkable," an art dealer commented, studying Ryan's work. "The artist clearly understands both technique and human nature." Who is this Jake person? Ryan slipped away before the conversation could continue, but the question echoed in his mind. Who is he now? The corporate executive who viewed charity as a tax write-off? Or the man who'd learned to see beauty in broken places? Later that evening, he overheard Lisa talking to a potential donor. "Our residents aren't just statistics," she was saying. "They're artists, professionals, dreamers. Jake, for instance, his talent could easily earn him a gallery showing, but he chooses to teach art to our children instead." The praise, though well-intentioned, felt like a knife twist. Every genuine connection he'd formed rested on a foundation of deception. The truth would hurt not just Lisa, but the entire community that had accepted Jake as one of their own. "You seem troubled," Marcus observed, finding Ryan alone later. "Success usually makes people happier." "Just thinking about choices," Ryan replied carefully. "How one decision can change everything." Marcus studied him with knowing eyes. "You know, in art, we talk about negative space, the emptiness that gives shape to what's there. Sometimes who we're not is as important as who we are." The wisdom in those words stayed with Ryan long into the night. As he lay on his shelter cot, listening to the familiar sounds of communal living, he realized his disguise had stripped away more than just his wealth. It had removed the barriers he'd built around his heart. Making the decision to use his fortune to help the community should have been simple, but Ryan found himself paralyzed by the complexity of execution. Every option seemed to lead back to the same problem: how to help without destroying the trust he'd built as Jake. One morning, while helping with breakfast service, Ryan watched Lisa manage the dwindling food supplies with her usual resourcefulness. She stretched portions carefully, ensuring everyone got something, even if it meant she went without. "Let's take a walk," she suggested unexpectedly during her break. "I could use some fresh air." They walked through the neighborhood, past shuttered businesses and empty lots. Lisa pointed out potent eel opportunities, abandoned buildings that could become training centers, empty lots perfect for community gardens. Her vision was practical, yet ambitious. "Sometimes I dream too big," she admitted, stopping at a small park. "My kids tell me I can't save everyone, but why not?" Ryan asked, genuinely curious about her limitations. Lisa laughed softly. "Resources, mainly. The foundation does what it can, but there's so much bureaucracy. Sometimes I wish I could just tell Mr. Carter directly what we need, show him what's possible." The irony of her statement hit Ryan hard. He had been right there all along, but had he ever really listened? "What would you tell him?" he pressed, careful to maintain his role as Jake. That charity isn't about tax write-offs and annual reports, she said firmly. It's about investment in human potential. These people don't need handouts. They need opportunities, dignity, a chance to rebuild. They sat on a park bench, watching neighborhood children play. Lisa continued, "You know, Jake, I've been meaning to tell you something. I think I know who you are." Ryan's heart stopped momentarily, but Lisa's next word surprised him. "You remind me of someone I used to know in college. Same quiet way of analyzing everything, same hidden artistic talent. For a while, I thought maybe you were him, trying to reconnect after all these years." Relief mixed with guilt as Ryan realized she'd created her own explanation for their familiar dynamic. "What happened to him?" he asked, buying time to steady his voice. "Life, I suppose. He had dreams of changing the world through art, but ended up in finance instead. Last I heard, he was very successful and very unhappy." The parallel to his own life struck Ryan deeply. How many dreams had he abandoned for success? How many connections had he sacrificed for status? "You know what's strange?" Lisa continued, unaware of his internal struggle. "Working with you these past weeks has helped me understand my boss better. Mr. Carter, he's always seemed so distant, but maybe he's just lost, like so many people here. Maybe he just needs someone to remind him what matters." Ryan struggled to maintain composure. "Maybe he's afraid," he suggested, echoing their earlier conversation, "of disappointing people, of not being enough." "Nobody's enough on their own," Lisa replied simply. "That's why we need community." The news about Lisa's mother's illness spread through the shelter community like a ripple. Ryan watched as residents, despite their own hardships, rallied to support her, offering to cover her shifts, bringing home-cooked meals, volunteering to watch her kids. "She won't take time off," Marcus confided in Ryan one evening. "Says she can't leave the shelter short-staffed, but you can see she's wearing herself thin." Ryan observed Lisa trying to maintain her usual efficiency while making frequent phone calls to hospitals and insurance companies. Dark circles formed under her eyes, but her smile never wavered when residents needed her. The breaking point came during a quiet afternoon. Lisa received a call that made her step outside, and through the window, Ryan watched her normally composed demeanor crumble. When she returned, her hands were shaking. "Mom's insurance won't cover the specialized treatment she needs," she explained to the shelter's director, her voice barely steady. "They're calling it experimental. The out-of-pocket cost is—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ryan knew exactly what the treatment would cost. His own mother had received the same care years ago. The amount would be impossible on Lisa's salary, even if she sold everything she owned. That night, unable to sleep, Ryan accessed his banking app through a secure connection on his hidden phone. With a few taps, he could solve everything, but at what cost to the trust he'd built? He thought about Lisa's words from their earlier conversations about his true identity as Mr. Carter. About distance, about understanding what matters. Would an anonymous donation be another form of distance? The next morning, Ryan watched Lisa arrive early as usual, despite having spent the night at the hospital. She immediately immersed herself in helping others, pushing aside her own concerns. "You should rest," he suggested gently. "Can't," she replied, sorting through donation boxes. "Too much to do. Besides, keeping busy helps. Your mother needs you too." Lisa paused, her hands stilling on a folded blanket. "Mom taught me that service to others is the best medicine for your own troubles. She used to bring me here when I was little to volunteer. That's why Her voice caught. "That's why I can't let this place down now." Ryan made his decision that afternoon. Using secure networks and carefully routed transactions, he established a new medical assistance fund through an independent foundation. The paperwork would appear to have been in process for months, with Lisa's mother meeting all eligibility requirements. The news reached Lisa while she was serving dinner. Ryan watched from across the room as she received the call, saw her sink into a chair, tears flowing freely for the first time since the crisis began. The shelter erupted in celebration when she shared the news. Residents hugged her, cried with her, shared her relief. Ryan stayed on the periphery, his heart both full and heavy. "It's a miracle," Lisa told him later, her eyes bright with renewed hope. "Mom's getting transferred to the specialist tomorrow." Sometimes the universe provides, Ryan said carefully, fighting the urge to reveal everything. You know what's strange? Lisa mused. The foundation that's helping. Their paperwork mentions specific criteria that exactly match Mom's case. Almost like she trailed off and Ryan saw something flicker in her eyes. Not quite suspicion, but awareness that pieces weren't quite fitting together. The morning Ryan planned to reveal his identity, the shelter buzzed with excitement over Lisa's mother's improving condition. The specialized treatment was working, and the anonymous foundation continued to cover all expenses smoothly. Ryan had spent the night crafting and discarding different approaches to the truth. Each scenario, he imagined, ended with the destruction of the genuine connections he'd built. Yet continuing the deception felt increasingly impossible. Before he could initiate his planned conversation with Lisa, she found him first. Her expression was different, focused, analytical, reminiscent of how she looked in board meetings. "Jake," she said quietly, or should I say Mr. Carter? The words hung in the air between them. Ryan felt his carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. "How long have you known?" he managed to ask. "Suspected for a while. Confirmed it yesterday when I saw the foundation's paperwork for Mom's treatment. The administrative style? I've been processing your documents for 5 years. I know it anywhere." Ryan waited for the anger, the sense of betrayal, but Lisa's next word surprised him. "Did you know I used to work for James Morrison at Morrison Capital?" The name hit Ryan like a physical blow. James Morrison had been his father's closest business partner and friend. "He was more than my employer," Lisa continued. "He was my mentor, helped me through college after my father died. When his firm collapsed in the scandal, I lost everything, my savings, my job, my faith in the system. That's how I ended up here, at the shelter, with my kids." Ryan remembered the Morrison scandal, one of the largest financial frauds of the decade. His father had barely escaped being implicated. "James always said there was another side to the story," Lisa said. "That someone knew the truth but chose to stay silent. Someone who could have prevented thousands of people from losing everything." The weight of understanding settled over Ryan. His father had known about Morrison's innocence BU. He had protected himself instead of speaking up. The guilt of that knowledge had driven his later charitable giving. And perhaps even his final request that Ryan learn to see beyond the surface of wealth and power. "I didn't know," Ryan said softly, "about your connection to Morrison. About any of it." "I know," Lisa replied. "Just like I know you didn't create that medical foundation just for my mother. You're setting up something bigger, aren't you?" Ryan nodded. The foundation was designed to help all shelter residents access medical care, education, and job training, but with a twist. It would be run by the residents themselves, with Lisa as executive director. "Your father came to see me, you know," Lisa added quietly. "A week before he died. He wanted to make things right, but didn't know how. He asked me to help you understand what real change looks like." The pieces fell into place. His father's last wishes, Lisa's unwavering dedication, his own journey from observer to participant in this community. "So what happens now?" Ryan asked. "Now," Lisa said with a small smile, "we do what this place has taught us. We work together. No more masks, no more divisions between donor and recipient. Real change happens when we recognize we're all part of the same story." The shelter's morning noise grew around them. Breakfast preparations, children laughing, Marcus setting up the art corner. A new day beginning, not with deception ended, but with truth revealed and purpose aligned. "Ready to really help?" Lisa asked, extending her hand. Ryan took it, finally understanding what his father had wanted him to learn. "Ready,"